I didn't think the last part. Oh, okay, we are live. So
Good evening, everyone.
we're going to get to the countdown now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Empowering Democracy. I am Joe Firestone, your host, and I am here with my activist friend from Georgia, Gregory Mallard of Revolution Evolution on Facebook. He'll be starting to stream this coming Friday, just a couple of days from now. He'll be starting his own stream, and we're all looking forward to it. Excuse me, I was just eating a piece of chocolate, and now I think I got to drink something. I see Steve Wolfbrandt is here. Thank you, Steve, for coming. I'm going to be going over the new rules package today, and Gregory will be commenting on it.
Yeah, I'll be providing some really great commentary.
He's going to provide the color, as they say in the sports game. So
you're going to remind me of that now.
So Kay says, hi, Stephen All. Thank you, Kay.
Yeah, I'm getting some shares out.
Hi to you. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, I can be live and still share everything.
Yeah, I know. You're a man of many talents. Robert Copen says, I hear Katie Porter is going to run for Senate. That's what I hear, too. She's made a formal.
It's true. She's already a declared candidate.
She's declared candidate. Everybody expects that Adam Schiff is going to run. So Katie Porter is going to contest Adam Schiff for that seat. And I'll bet you the Democratic Party is going to throw its weight in back of Adam Schiff. But let's the rest of us throw our weights behind Katie Porter.
Wait, is that the dude that sees Russians everywhere?
He's the dude who sees Russians everywhere and who's the closest thing the Democratic Party has to the CIA. He is very tightly linked with the CIA. He's the big intelligence man in the House. So, yeah, we pretty much know who would be doing a better job as a senator, but we also have to note that from the dump the corruption standpoint, Katie Porter doesn't make the grade. Of course, we know that Adam Schiff is going to be even worse, but still, we need to look for someone who does meet the litmus test in that particular Senate run, because we need to apply the dump the corruption rule. So going to the rules package, the way I'm going to discuss the rule package, hi Cora, the way I'm going to discuss the rule package is that I'm going to look at a piece from Roll Call that deals with it pretty systematically. The piece was originally written on January 2nd, but it was corrected on January 9th. But it wasn't corrected in enough time to have included the final vote for Kevin McCarthy. So the author didn't have time to include that in this. But nevertheless, the rules package is pretty much as is. I don't think anything changed in that at the last minute. So let's go over it and see what's in it and talk about its implications for politics. Okay, because those implications are quite important, I believe. So I'm going to share the screen now, and we're going to hit this piece. I also have the actual language of the bill here, or the rules package, if we need to dig into that. If we find that there's some ambiguity in it and we need to dig into that, I do have the exact language of the rules package as of January 9th. Okay, this was written by Lindsay McPherson, okay, originally on January 2nd, okay, for roll call. It was corrected on January 9th. A proposed House rules package Republicans released late Sunday, which, as you know, was January 8th, includes a few olive branches from Kevin McCarthy to Freedom Caucus members who have yet to commit to supporting him for Speaker. The gestures from him include proposals to reduce to 5 the number of Republicans it would take to force a vote on ousting the Speaker, create a select judiciary subcommittee to centralize investigations into the executive branch, limit bills to a single subject, and make it harder to waive the germaneness rule for amendments. But those proposals did not appear to be enough to win over many members who have opposed making him Speaker. A January 1st letter from House Freedom Caucus Chairman Scott Perry, Republican of Pennsylvania, and 8 other Republicans affiliated with the hardline conservative group called those rules changes progress, quote unquote, and helpful, quote unquote. But they said a written response provided by Kevin McCarthy Friday to demands they laid out in the December 8th letter is, quote, missing specific commitments with respect to virtually every component of our entreaties, unquote, and did not address their request that leadership in their affiliated political action committees stop getting involved in Republican primaries. That was a big thing. See, the Republicans, just like the Democrats, are getting involved in primaries against people that the establishment doesn't like. On the Republican side, they're working against Freedom Caucus people in the primaries or new candidates that are affiliated with the Freedom Caucus. On the Democratic side, of course, the DCCC is doing this to the progressive Democratic candidates.
It's not just the DCCC doing that as well. It's also the DGA, which is the Democratic Governors Association, urging state Democratic parties not to hold primaries back in 2022 so that way they can coalesce, like an example, behind a Stacey Abrams who still lost. We could have had a much better candidate had that not been the case. So they're doing the same thing as the Democrats, but every level, the DGA, the DCCC, the DSCC, which is the senatorial wing of the fundraising wing for Senate Democrats, and all that. But yet, there's so much corruption going on there.
Yep. But the point here is it's going on in both parties, and the Freedom Caucus people are subject to it, okay, as well as the Congressional Progressive Caucus over on the Democratic side. Of course, the corruption has gone right into the caucus, as we know from watching the primaries this year. Okay, so to go on, McCarthy has yet to secure the 218 votes he would likely need to be elected Speaker, and we know, of course, that he was elected Speaker with 216 votes eventually. They remark here that's the majority threshold if all 434 members elect. There's one vacancy since Representative A. Donald McEakin, Democrat of Virginia, died a few weeks after winning re-election, are present and vote for a candidate in the Speaker's election by name. That is a precise statement of what goes on in the House and what went on during the election, of Kevin McCarthy. There were 6 people who voted present. Those were Freedom Caucus people who were prevailed upon to let Kevin McCarthy win by voting present. When they did that, it lowered the threshold that was necessary for Kevin McCarthy to get the majority vote he needed to become the Speaker. They lowered the threshold to 200. The votes were, I think, 6. There were 428 people, who were voting. So he needed 215 to have a majority in that case. And he actually got 216 in the final vote. So any absences or members voting present in the Speaker's election could lower the majority threshold and help Kevin McCarthy, and that is indeed what happened. 5 Republicans, separate from those who signed Perry's letter, have publicly announced plans to oppose McCarthy, and as we know, those people gave up their plans to oppose McCarthy and voted present instead. I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs here because we now know Kevin McCarthy has won. One of the most significant provisions in the rules package outside of the measures McCarthy included to appease his skeptics is a move to strip House employees' collective bargaining rights. The Democrats adopted a resolution in May that granted nearly 9,100 House staffers the ability to form a union, but Republicans put language in the rules saying that resolution shall have no force or effect during the 118th Congress. So in other words, if you vote against the Republicans next time for the 119th Congress, then that language will have force and effect during the 119th Congress. So that's an incentive to vote against the Republicans next time. Okay, motion to vacate. As Republicans have debated the rules, they spent a lot of time discussing the motion to vacate the chair, which is the mechanism for ousting the Speaker. Till 4 years ago, any member could file a privilege motion to vacate. When a measure is privileged, it can be brought up for a vote over the objection of leadership. So that's the key thing. A privileged motion gets a vote even if the leadership doesn't want to bring it to the floor. It goes to the floor anyway within a specific period of time. Freedom Caucus members used the motion to vacate in 2015 to help force out then Speaker John Boehner. Kevin McCarthy ran for Speaker then, but dropped out just before the conference nomination vote in the middle of opposition from the Freedom Caucus. The Democrats changed the motion to vacate in 2019 after taking back the majority to say it is only privileged of a party caucus or a party conference instead of just a single member. Freedom Caucus members wanted to restore the old rule, but the rules package keeps the current rule in place with a key exception. Language is added that would allow a motion to vacate to be privileged if 5 members of the majority party sign on to the resolution, which means 5 Republicans could come together and force a vote on ousting McCarthy or whoever the House elects Speaker. That part of the rule package did not get through the fighting at the last minute, and now the old rule has been restored with no exceptions. Each member of the House now can offer a privileged motion to vacate the chair, that is, get rid of the Speaker. However, since the language is the same as it used to be in the old rule, it's no longer restricted to members of the majority party. The language itself now says if one member, that a single member can make a privileged motion to vacate the chair. It does not distinguish that by party. So as the rule stands now, the rule that has now been passed, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or third party, if you remember the House, you can put forward a motion to vacate the chair that will get a vote. Ohio Rep. Jim Jordan, former Freedom Caucus chair, who is supporting McCarthy's speaker bid after he unsuccessfully ran against him for minority leader in 2018, floated the 5-member threshold as a compromise that Kevin McCarthy agreed to support. That, again, is no longer relevant because Kevin McCarthy did compromise with the Freedom Caucus on that. And now the old rule, which existed for most of the Republic, the Thomas Jefferson rule, some of them called that, is now back in. That was a Freedom Caucus win. Here are some other Freedom Caucus wins. One is a rule designed to limit bills to a single subject. Specifically, the new rule would prohibit members from introducing bills or joint resolutions after February 1st without including a statement for the congressional record designating a single subject of the legislation. But the rule does not include any further mechanisms for enforcing the single subject limitation. So it's unclear whether this rule will have much practical effect. That's what this article says. Okay, and I agree, but I also add that what will probably happen is someone will make a point of order that a particular bill is not about a single subject, but even though a statement to that effect might have gone into the congressional record, and that since it's not a subject, that the bill is out of order. If that is done, it will probably be necessary for the whole House to vote on whether the bill is about a single subject. Because there's nothing that I've seen that says that only the majority party members can offer a point of order. All the House members can offer a point of order. And if there's a floor vote done, then Democrats will be able to decide whether a bill is out of order or not, as well as Republicans. It will be a vote for the whole House. There may be situations where a Freedom Caucus member makes an objection to a bill saying that it's out of order because it's not about a single subject. When the floor vote then comes, it won't be a floor vote of just the majority party itself. It will be a floor vote of Democrats as well as Republicans. And therefore, a bill may be ruled out of order on a bipartisan vote. even in a situation where the heavy majority of Republicans is for a bill and thinks it's about a single subject, the Freedom Caucus and everybody on the Democratic side may decide the bill is out of order, and then it could not be passed in the House. Haven't seen people talking about this as a possibility, but the language allows it. Another change the Freedom Caucus secured is a ban on the Rules Committee practice of waiving points of order against amendments that violate the germaneness rule in the House. And there's a rule that says that if you're going to put an amendment on a bill, it has to be germane to that particular bill. Now, that was really never enforced. I never saw that enforced at all. It's a rule, but I never saw it enforced by a point of order. And many times I saw that bills that had been called something and had a number had their content replaced by other bills that were not germane to the original bill. This rule may make that kind of substitution impossible. Nancy Pelosi was an expert in doing that kind of thing. Instead, the package creates a new rule requiring the House to vote on any motions to waive germaneness for an amendment after up to 20 minutes of debate. That may or may not be helpful to democracy in the House, because I think there are ways to just have a floor vote to waive the germaneness for an amendment. I guess the point I'm making here is that the rules in the House are really quite arbitrary. Maybe I shouldn't say arbitrary. They are quite vulnerable to very quick changes. Rule changes in the House can happen at a drop of the hat. It's up to the Speaker. It's up to a floor vote. One day you can have a rule in existence, and the next day the whole House could decide to get rid of that rule, or I should say a majority of the House could decide to get rid of that rule. It's much more flexible than the Senate is when it comes to getting rid of rules, if people want to do it. Anyway, Kevin McCarthy has agreed not to waive an existing House rule requiring bills to be released at least 72 hours before a floor vote. But the rules package does not contain any new language to ensure that commitment is upheld. So that seems to be another thing that Kevin McCarthy can easily get around. In other words, this whole rules package thing and the big fight over it may prove to be just a chimera, because they may move to change the rules very, very quickly, or to ignore certain rules depending on sentiments in the caucus. But theoretically, people will have at least 72 hours before a floor vote to read a bill. As many of you know, there were people complaining that they, including Senator Bernie Sanders in one instance, that he had received a bill about 15 minutes before he made this statement that he was supposed to vote on 28 minutes from the time he made the statement. He was not very happy about that. He might have added that that particular bill was a 4,000-page bill. I mean, it was really ridiculous. They just would turn out these bills, and used the leverage of the situation, the need for speed to pass a bill, to force everyone to vote for it without really reading it and understanding what the lobbies had snuck into these bills.
Yeah, I've always thought that it was crazy how these bills would come through and be forced upon people without having much time to read over them or see what the content is inside of each individual bill. And the majority of the bills that have been introduced or passed, nobody has had any time to read over them, yet they are passing them anyways without reading what's actually in them. And like what Steve Wolfbrand just said, nobody has any time to read over a bill that is 4,000 or more pages.
Yes, now they're not all 4,000 pages, but nobody has time to read over a bill in the situation we described if it's 2,000 pages or if it's 1,500 pages. They might possibly get a chance to read a bill that was 125 pages long, but longer than that, they can't read. Now, the ironic thing about this is when these bills are written, the omnibus bills put together and written, the lobbyists are there to suggest language to the people writing the bills. They're either there because someone gives them a call and asks them to come in to help, or they're there because the lobbies have put people on the congressional staffs themselves or the Senate staffs themselves for a while. So, in that situation, these lobbyist people can write the actual language to stick in these bills. So, they're writing in the language, and your representatives don't even have time to read what they've written in it before they're asked to vote, before the vote is forced upon them. Okay, now generally we talk about, force the vote here and how it's good to force the vote. Well, guess what? The establishment has been forcing votes, but they've been forcing votes that were never contemplated, in ways that were never contemplated by anyone. They're forcing representatives to vote without reading the bills. It's really been a total travesty when it comes to what our representatives are supposed to do. So let's go back to the document. The rules package also sets up a vote on a resolution to establish a select judiciary subcommittee to centralize investigations into the executive branch called the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. The image here is that the Democrats, or earlier Republicans perhaps, just for a long time, there's been a weaponization of the powers of the federal government against ordinary people. And the Republicans established this particular subcommittee so that it could investigate that. What kinds of mechanisms in the federal government have been weaponized to get to hurt ordinary people, to violate their civil rights or civil liberties. Now, of course, this sounds like a very good thing, but the way the Republicans operate, of course, they're far more interested in the civil rights or civil liberties of very rich people. So when they say civil liberties, they're talking about the IRS pushing around very wealthy people, in their view, pushing around very wealthy people to collect their taxes. So we have to know the code here in part. Anyway, the article points out this panel could have been established in the rules package itself, so it's unclear why McCarthy is making it a separate vote. I thought that was a good question. But the further comment, it's possible enough Republicans may oppose creating the panel that the resolution itself, or the rule resolution, okay, is ultimately defeated. And maybe that's why they decided to make it a separate vote. They didn't want the whole rules resolution to be defeated because of this particular suggestion to investigate the weaponization of the federal government. So that's what happened. But I believe what has actually happened there is that both the rules package was passed and this committee was also established. I may be mistaken about that, but I thought that just before I came to the program I was on at 7 o'clock, that the House was voting on that question of whether they were going to have this special subcommittee. So I'm not certain that it got through, but I think it did. The rules package also returns some House rules Republicans had when they were in the majority and the Democrats got rid of in 2019, and it eliminates a few rules Democrats had in place for the past two Congresses. Several of those are budget-related rules that Republicans feel better adhere to their spending and tax priorities. The GOP replaced Democrats' preferred pay-as-you-go rule, Nancy Pelosi's favorite. It's got to be deficit neutral. You got to pay as you go for whatever spending you're going to do. That required that the legislation that was adding to the deficit had to be offset with spending cuts or tax increases. But the Republicans have replaced this with a cut as you go rule, which actually was put in at the same time as Paul Ryan became Speaker. The cut go rule only requires offsets if bills increase mandatory spending within a 5-year or 10-year budget window. This means Republicans can pass tax cuts that would add to the deficit, which they have already broadcast plans to do with legislation to extend several provisions of their 2017 law that have expired or are set to sunset in 2025. Okay, but we have to note here that under the cut-go rule, you have to offset increases in mandatory spending with reductions in mandatory spending somewhere else. So you can only make things neutral by decreasing spending somewhere else, but you can't make things neutral by raising taxes. Also, in the tax cutting spirit, Republicans in the House are requiring a supermajority, a 3/5 supermajority to pass any tax rate increases. The commentary here in this article says this is largely a symbolic rule. However, since Republicans control what legislation and amendments come to the floor, and they wouldn't bring any measures to the floor that would raise tax rates up for a vote. Well, that may be, but I think it's significant that they're creating a situation which is very much like the Senate, except with respect to tax rate increases. Tax rate increases require a 60% super vote, 3/5 is 60%, to pass any tax rate increases. Okay, another rule that would help Republicans with tax cuts would require the CBO and Joint Committee on Taxation to incorporate the macroeconomic effects. Now, this is very bad because the CBO and the Joint Committee on Taxation models are awful when it comes to projections. They're almost always wrong, and they're almost always biased in a conservative direction. I should say an economic austerity direction. Okay, and you know that their macroeconomic projections are no damn good. Anyway, they want to incorporate macroeconomic projections like changes in economic output and employment into their official cost estimates for major legislation to the extent that is practical. Well, the truth is, it's never practicable. It's always fakery of some kind because their projections aren't accurate even 6 months later. That's why they have to do corrections to their projections. In other words, usually they do a projection in January. But by May, they're already correcting that projection. Notice they're doing projection for a fiscal year which started, in on October 1st. Then the CBO convenes in January to make a projection for the rest of the fiscal year. And by June, they're already reprojecting because they weren't accurate.
Because there's always a lot of uncertainty in the projections because they cannot project what could happen month for month because something totally different could be happening in that factor.
Right. It could be changes that are due to legislation itself, or it could be changes in the economy that their models do a terrible job of actually predicting, which is the truth, actually. The macroeconomic models of the Congressional Budget Office are not up to standard. They incorporate terrible economic assumptions that are almost never true. It's just a game. In other words, in 1974, they established the CBO to do these projections as a backing for austerity that the people who put into the CBO wanted to see come to Washington. And ever since then, they've been playing the austerity game. A major prop for austerity is the Congressional Budget Office and its numbers. And the Joint Committee on Taxation is also staffed by austerity hounds. Anyway, major legislation is defined as a measure that would cause a gross budgetary effect in any fiscal year within the budget window that equals or exceeds 0.25% of the projected GDP for that year. Okay, so notice they are projecting, and the errors in their projections are probably always going to exceed 0.25% of the projected GDP for that year. And when they deal with austerity, of course, they're looking at the ratio of the projected debt to the projected GDP. And they're getting upset if that goes up. But their projections are always likely to be wrong, both for the magnitude of the deficit and for the magnitude of the projected GDP. I'm telling you, it's outrageous. Anyway, Alternatively, the budget chair can designate spending legislation, and the Ways and Means chair can designate revenue legislation as major for purposes of triggering this rule that the legislation has to be major legislation. So that's that rule, which for various reasons I've stated doesn't make any sense. The package also restores 2 budget points of order. One that can be raised against amendments to appropriation bills that would result in a net increase in budget authority, and another against budget reconciliation directives that would lead to a net increase in direct spending. So, of course, again, that's part of the austerity game. It's easy for the Republicans to raise points of order when there are amendments to appropriation bills that would involve additional spending. And that's what the Republicans want to do. They don't want to have additional spending except for military spending or police spending.
Or corporate bailouts.
Thank you, Greg. Or corporate bailouts. Absolutely. Suddenly, when something has gone wrong with the economy, as in the pandemic, there is no barrier to corporate bailouts. IRS issues 12 million tax refunds after correcting 2020 returns. Okay, that's 12 million tax returns.
Yeah.
Not $12 million.
Yeah.
Okay, that was just something from Bonnie. So it would also create a new point of order against any legislation that would increase direct spending by more than $2.5 billion on net in any of the 4 decades after the official 10-year budget window. So now they want the CBO to project 50 years out. And they want to make that part of the budget window 50 years out. Here is an organization that cannot project accurately 5 months out.
Excuse me for a minute. I don't know if there's a moderator in the chat, but we've got a bot.
Well, if we've got a bot, we've got a bot. So what? I don't know if there's a moderator in the chat, but why should bots bother us if they're obviously bots? You know.
But that's just crazy how they want to project something 50 years out when they can't even project the next month.
When they can't even project, in other words, when the CBO can't project from January through September, but has to have a correction made at the end of May or in early June in order to be anywhere near accurate, how the hell can they project out for 50 years? The answer is they can't. But what they can do is, because their models have an austerity bias, they can now get the CBO to publish reports that say 50 years out, this is going to be outside of the budget window. More than $2.5 billion on net. 50 years out. And anybody is supposed to take this seriously? This is baloney, but it's a tool of the austerity mongers in Washington who want people to be poor, except for the rich, who they want to be richer. Another new point of order would prohibit appropriations increases over the previous fiscal year for any expenditures not written into an enacted authorizing law. So, I don't know what they're going to do with single bills that both authorize and appropriate, but this obviously assumes the regular order model in Congress, where they pass an authorization bill first and then later they pass an appropriations bill that actually funds. Okay, so they're assuming that is going to happen, and that this can be done in an orderly manner.
It's still insanity how they are expecting the CBO to have a 50-year budget window when they can't even get things right throughout the whole entire year, when they're having to go back and redo things periodically.
Yeah, yes, I know this is a joke. It's a farce. It's just an excuse for austerity, the way things now work, in Washington. A further sentence I did not read. If that point of order is raised and sustained, an amendment reducing the appropriation to the most recent enacted level would be considered automatically adopted. So, in other words, there won't even be a vote on reducing the appropriation, but applying that rule, the appropriation would automatically be reduced to the past level. That's another bias towards not spending on what people need. On the other hand, this Congress is certain to exempt the military appropriations from that sort of rule. I predict that's going to happen. Here are some other changes. This is a whole bullet points of changes. Directing the January 6th Select Committee, which is not being renewed, of course, to transfer its records to the House Administration Committee by January 17th. Next bullet point, establishing a Select Oversight Subcommittee with up to 12 Speaker-appointed members, up to 5 of which may be members of the minority, but don't have to be. So they might want to shut out, the minority on this oversight committee entirely, to investigate the origins of the coronavirus pandemic and make legislative recommendations to prevent future pandemics. Next bullet point, reducing the minimum time for floor votes from 5 minutes to 2 minutes. When you see them scurrying around, if you watch these floor votes sometimes, you see them scurrying around to try to get into a 5-minute time frame, really rushing. They're just going to have to stay in their seats. I mean, they won't have time to get up and go to the John before they vote. Changing the name of 2 committees, oversight and reform, would be oversight, and accountability. I guess they don't like the word reform. And education and labor would be education and the workforce. They hate labor because they hate unions. So they even want to play with the semantics here. Folks, it's going to be a long 2 years with these guys. But we have to always keep in mind, to get any laws through the Congress to do the real damage they want to do, they have to get by the Senate, which is, of course, still Democratic by at least a few votes. Requiring each standing committee except appropriations, ethics, and rules to adopt an authorization and oversight plan for submission to the Oversight and House Administration Committees by March the 1st. Directing the Ethics Committee to establish a process for members of the public to flag potential violations. So they're directing the Ethics Committee to establish a process for the public to have some input. But, well, anyway, I'll go along with that in a few minutes. We'll see something. But next bullet point, requiring the Speaker to establish a bipartisan task force to review House ethics rules and regulations and submit a report on recommended improvements. That is window dressing. Bullet point, allowing only non-government witnesses to participate in hearings remotely, meaning government officials must testify in person. That's because the Republicans like the government officials so much. They want them to be there in person. Another bullet point, striking a rule allowing the Washington, D.C. mayor and governors of the United States territories access to the House chamber. So, in other words, the Washington, D.C. mayor and governors of U.S. territories now cannot access the House chamber without special permission. In other words, without them actually being called to testify by congresspeople. Directing House officials to broaden the availability of documents in machine-readable formats and continue improving the electronic document repository for committee documents. Next bullet point, establishing rules for considering various bills Republicans plan to take up in early January, like some taxing bills they have in mind. So that's the summary of the rules package that was given by the roll call publication.
Back to that part about the way they're reducing that time from 5 minutes to 2 minutes. That's not going to be enough time at all. And I know here in the state of Georgia, and this is what I was told by a friend of mine, when they do votes in the Georgia State House of Representatives, they have a little electronic things right there at your desk. And this is even in the state Senate building. It's like where you vote yes, no, or present. And it's like 3 buttons on an electronic deal where you vote right there at your desk instead of having to get up and go to the floor and vote.
Yeah, that seems to be the situation in the Congress. We see them going up, constantly going up.
That's going to be like running through an anthill. There's going to be like little ants running through the anthill.
That's going to be like little ants, right, running through the anthill.
And I think the way that the Georgia State House of Representatives and the Georgia State Senate, if they would put an electronic box there that allows them to vote from their desks instead of going to the floor to vote, it would make things a whole lot more efficient.
Okay, they do have electronic voting on some things in the House, but whether a vote is going to be an electronic vote, okay, or whether it's going to be a get up and do it vote, I guess that's determined by the Speaker, because the language here for 2 minutes votes in the actual document says, subsection C provides the Speaker can reduce vote times in the House to not less than 2 minutes on any question that follows another electronic vote. So if there's been a first electronic vote on something, then the Speaker can reduce the vote time in the House to not less than 2 minutes on any question that follows that first electronic vote. So the idea seems to be that if the Speaker called for a non-electronic vote to begin with, Okay, then the speaker cannot limit a vote following that to 2 minutes. But if there was electronic vote on some question to start with, then he can limit any further voting on that question to 2 minutes. He or she can, except in the case in the House now, of course, we're back to a he.
It's just insanity. And the rules package is just insane.
Well, it turns out it's not so variant from the rules package for the 117th Congress. Okay, except for the modifications made in Section 2. Okay, that was, the official language for the modifications. They put it in one paper that amounted to 12 pages, okay, of verbiage. Okay, the Republicans have for a long time trying to get cost estimates for the major legislation to include the macroeconomic effects. That was known as dynamic scoring. Okay, the Republicans, starting with Paul Ryan, favored, dynamic scoring. So basically, they've restored that uh, to the House now. That's what we're going to see.
And there has to be a more efficient way to doing things than what the rules package says. Like there's got to be a lot more efficiency.
Okay, there was something in here that I haven't seen, but I know it occurred because it was mentioned in something I saw, okay, on YouTube, that there's some rule in here that actually guts the funding for the committee, okay, on ethics. So they're inviting people to make complaints to the committee on ethics on the one hand, but they are gutting the funding to the committee subcommittee of the committee on ethics on the other. So that was one dirty trick they pulled. I haven't found the verbiage for that yet. Okay, but I know.
Well, we expected all of this. This was to be expected. So I'm not at all shocked. I'm just bewildered at how crazy the rules package really is. Like it's totally bewildering.
Oh, they also had something in there called the Holman Rule. It comes in Section 3 under separate orders. Subsection A reinstates the Holman Rule, which allows amendments to appropriations bills that would reduce the salary of or fire specific federal employees or cut a specific program. Okay, so you have this lady in the Federal Trade Commission known, okay, as Lina Khan. She is currently trying to regulate the private sector companies to prevent them from using these non-compete contracts, from forcing non-compete contracts onto the employees. So she's promulgating that, as a regular, obviously increasing competitiveness in business and opening up the possibility for new businesses to start. But I'll bet that they're going to apply this Holman rule to reduce the salary or fire Lena Khan. Because she is regulating big business for the first time in many decades. She's very brilliant, by the way, and very courageous also. They probably put in this rule just for her and just for Jonathan Cantor, who's at another very important regulatory agency. But those two have been teaming up to go after big business in the United States to make it more competitive. I'm just looking here to see if there's anything that was not important that was not covered in the roll call article.
I know one thing. It's going to be one hell of a 12 next 2 years.
Oh, yeah, the next 2 years are going to be tough. But we again have to keep in mind that the Senate is not going to go along with these rules of the House. And they will produce what they want to produce in the way, okay, of legislation. So either there's going to be a stalemate or the House will find some way to compromise with the Senate. I personally think the next 2 years are going to be largely ones of stalemate. And my strong recommendation is that the president had better mint the $100 trillion coin right now, just to change the atmosphere, just to demonstrate to the public that the outstanding debt of the United States will be going down each year until it ceases to exist after about 30 years, so that there won't be $32 trillion worth of debt. And furthermore, to demonstrate to the public that there's plenty of money to do deficit spending.
Mint the coin.
So that if the Republicans decide that they don't want to spend on something, they won't be able to say, we decided not to spend on something because we can't afford it. They'll only be able to say, we're not going to spend on this thing because we're not in favor of it.
Or their donors are not in favor of it.
Yes, or that our donors are not in favor of it. But either way, they're going to have to be accountable for what they're refusing to spend on without having the excuse of fiscal responsibility, because it won't have anything to do with fiscal responsibility, because there's going to be enough money to cover any expenses we are likely to have for the next 10 years. And even then, we'll be able to mint another $100 trillion platinum coin if we want to. As long, of course, as the Republicans are unsuccessful in repealing the coin law. That will depend on how the public votes, and also depend on whether Democrats can retain control of Congress, of the Senate, and will also depend, on whether the president is a Democrat who wants to keep that power. So we have to see what's going to happen there. Anyway, there's close language in this rule package. It's going to be hard to relate it to specific situations, and there may be many surprises. There may be many little catch 22s in this rule package that are damaging. So I guess that's all I have to say about it at this point. What's your view, Greg?
In my
Have you
view,
anything to add?
in terms of the coin and all that, I would make, let's say, Medicare for all were to pass and get passed into law and signed into law on a president's desk. I would like for that funding to be made uh, permanent instead of something that cannot be reversed. Put that into like a Medicare for all bill where the funding must be made permanent. It can never be touched unless let's say there's population increases every 5 to 10 years, which there's going to be. Adjust the funding and increase the funding as the population grows. But
The authority to mint $100 trillion coin is there right now.
Yeah.
It can be done tomorrow, okay, by the president. Now, that power, of course, can be yanked away by Congress, but the president can veto any bill trying to do that, and the Senate is unlikely to vote for it, for yanking it away, as long as the president is a Democrat and wants to retain the power. So the Republicans are not strong enough yet to take the authority away to mint the $100 trillion coin. Okay, now they were strong enough in the 2017 to 2018 Congress, but they forgot about the coin, and they didn't do that. They actually had bills in Congress in 2013 and 2014 because they had taken over the House to yank the authority away from the president. But they could never get those through at that time. But they had a 2-year window when they could have done it. But the guy who wanted to do it had already left the Congress. So his bill was not resubmitted in those years. So Biden still has that power, which Obama had too. But Obama never wanted to use it for silly reasons.
Just like he never wanted to codify Roe v. Wade into federal law and keep his House and keep his Senate.
Well, it's not quite like that. It's even worse because he had the power, but he refused to use it. He had the power for his whole 2 terms. He didn't know about that power until 2011 sometime, or certainly 2012. He knew it when he was running for a second term. But he never used it. He said he never used it because it would disturb the bond markets. Now, that was clearly a lie because the federal government would not be using the bond markets anymore So why was it important whether the bond markets would be disturbed or not? If they, he was afraid, well, they're going to be disturbed, so he won't be able to fund any more deficits. But of course, if he had minted the $100 trillion coin, he would have had all the funding he needed for deficits for a very long time. So he was
I
telling,
think I think minting the coin would give at least 25, 30 years worth of funding for everything that even Bernie Sanders called for.
well, I don't know if you had. Uh, we're talking about to do something about the climate emergency. We're talking about having seven, maybe $1 trillion budgets for 10 years. That's $70 trillion. And if we're talking about also paying down the debt to close to nothing, to show the people that there's no debt problem, then you're talking about paying out $32.5 trillion plus the interest. So those two things over a 10-year period would exhaust $100 trillion. That doesn't
Steve,
cost.
there you go again.
Huh?
I'm laughing at what Steve just said.
I mean, I support the Grain Party.
Steve, I love you, brother. I love you.
Okay, Steve, the answer to your earlier question,
I'll
where
be
would a
right
hundred
back here in just
trillion
a second.
dollar coin be kept? And who could make change on that? The answer is the $100 trillion coin would be kept in a vault at the Federal Reserve. And the other answer is no one uh, that, in effect, replacing the $100 trillion coin with $100 trillion in the public enterprise fund account, okay, of the mint, that would make change on the coin. Okay, in other words, if you turn the $100 trillion into electronic money, okay, in the accounts of the Treasury Department, then you can make all the change you want to make. I know you were joking, but there is really an answer to that. Biden might use the coin in the vending machine at the White House. Yeah, he might. He might. He might not. Anyway, it's easy to handle the coin. Steve Wolfman said, I reported the sex bot. No mods here. Might head over there later. Thanks. Laugh out loud. So did we have? Oh yeah, there's a sex bot over here. Okay, great. Are we bothered by the sex bot? No, we're not bothered by the sex bot. Did the sex bot really interfere with our discussion? No, sex bot didn't interfere with our discussion. They made changes to the state budget here in California in May, as they are never accurate. Yeah, I know, never accurate. Steve, could you see the ACA as a 10-page bill? No, if I recall correctly, the ACA is a 1,300-page bill. The ACA was something like 1,300 pages, if I remember correctly. Or maybe it was 2,100. I don't think my memory is that sharp on it. But it was a very great number of pages. John Conyers' Medicare for All bill, H.R. 676, which was contemporaneous with the ACA, that was 35 pages. That was a short bill on a single subject. Okay, even Jayapal's bill is only 125 pages long, her Medicare for All bill. Steve Overman said they should limit bills to about 10 pages. Yeah, I agree with that. 4,000 pages for fuck's sake, says Steve Wolfbrand. K. Ryan said Porter will be on Lawrence O'Donnell's show at 10 p.m. NBC. Yeah, Porter is sure to get a lot of support, okay, from MSNBC. Because they consider her a good Democrat. Okay, so that's the rules package.
In a
Tomorrow
nutshell.
tomorrow I'll get back to the main business these days, which is to find out if there's anybody in the past the litmus test, the dump the corruption litmus test. We did evaluate Katie Porter a few days ago on that litmus test. And she was pretty good in some ways, but she failed that litmus test by a good deal. A good deal. Okay, anything to add, Greg?
We just have to dump this corruption.
Oh, we
We
do.
have to dump this corruption.
Oh, we
Bigger
do.
than there's as big as there's a cow in Texas.
Did you see what the Republicans did? They defunded the ethics committee, so it could hardly have any staff. I mean, they have crippled it. In other words, they put this in the rules that there would be a reduction in the funding for the ethics committee. They tried to cripple the ethics committee because
They don't want accountability.
they don't want accountability, and in addition, because they don't want anybody interfering with their efforts to cut taxes for the richest people in America. Anything that smacks of opposition to what they intend there is going to be slapped down by this House. It was so important for the Democrats to win the House, and I think they would have won it if they had backed some of the progressives they hate so much.
That's why we need to dump all of the corruption. And that's the only way we can go about getting anything progressive passed into law is we've got to have a strong litmus test like what we have been talking about time and time and time again.
The reason
the
why
litmus test must be strictly enforced.
the reason why we have to have that test is because it's a simple rule that people can follow to get rid of all the corruption we see now. It's not about the individual candidates. It's about getting rid of the money because we've gotten rid of the people who take it. The task is to get rid of the money because the money in politics is ruining our country. It is undermining the integrity of all of the candidates. It's not even manifested just in the individual candidates. It's manifested in the power structure in Congress. And that power structure corrupts then even good candidates who get elected. So it's destroying the possibility for the will of the people to be listened to in Congress. Robert Copeland says, I don't think anybody will pass the litmus test on dump the corruption. I believe that's true, Robert. But
That's a strong possibility.
it's a strong possibility, but I'm not prejudging that possibility. I'm trying to painstakingly go through the funding records of those 100 or so people who are in the CPC, and that way showing that everybody's failing, that even the CPC is failing. Certainly, all the Republicans have to be failing, and all the other Democrats have to be failing if everybody in the CPC is failing. Steve Wolfbrand said to Robert, only a few local people here in LA could pass it at Kashama. Yeah, Kashama could probably pass it all day long.
Oh man, Kashama Sawant would pass that with flying colors.
That's what I think too. That's exactly what I think too.
I would love to see somebody like Kashama. I would like to see at least 100 Kashama Sawants elected to Congress.
Well, if we required, if we got people to vote on the basis of the litmus test, we would get a lot more than 100 Kashama Sawants.
We'd probably wind up with at least if that litmus test was strictly applied across the board, we would probably wind up with like 150, 160 Kashama Sawants.
And we'd elect, okay, a lot of other people who, if even if they weren't Kashama Sawants, they would be pretty good because they would be bought by the money.
Hell, we'd probably elect a whole bunch of Rodolfo Cortezes. That would be a dream to wake up one morning and there's like 150 to 200 Rodolfo Cortez clones types elected to Congress. That would be beautiful.
Right, and then another 100 to 150 Kashama Sawants clones.
That would be a beautiful Congress working in lockstep with the people instead of the corporate donors.
Yes.
And I would love for us to work with Kashama Sawant, Rodolfo Cortez. I would love to go on to like this, like what I've been doing here lately. I've been going on a lot of Green Party live streams that I've been seeing, even a lot of the young Greens bringing up dumping the corruption. They are very, very much in lockstep with us. And I would love to have them on a show here in the future.
Well, let's have them on the show in the future. If they would come,
I'm gonna
show next week.
I'm gonna take like over the coming months and try to get them even on a show with one of the two of us. That would be really amazing to have these young Greens get on board. And even talk about election strategy with them as well, like what they need to do in terms of voter outreach and where they need to go, who they need to reach out to, and so forth.
As Robert Copeland says, I believe my city council member, Katie Valenzuela, would pass the litmus test.
That's my plan, Robert. I am strongly open to the premise of having them on my show. And that's the thing that I'm going to work toward is having panel discussions with young Greens across the country, and anybody who is a Green, or also socialist alternative people, even local and state DSA, but not the national DSA.
Yeah, national DSA seems to have a problem.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the local and state level DSA and getting them on board with us.
So evidently Jacobin has admitted that forcing the vote was a good idea.
Oh, so they finally came around?
They finally came around, but they haven't admitted that they were wrong in 2021. Of course, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are rubbing that in their face.
Oh, they've been everyone who has been anti-force the vote has is trying to come out now and saying that they were for force the vote the entire time.
Yeah, I'm sure Cenk is doing that, saying he was for force the vote.
Cenk
But
Uygur, Anna Kasparian.
yeah, but he didn't support the force the vote people because they had no plan. They had no plan about what to do after they forced the vote. Okay, the thing is, I had a plan. I knew exactly what they were supposed to do. All I had to do was to defeat Nancy Pelosi and then defeat anyone else who would possibly follow her, who was less of a lefty than Nancy Pelosi. And
Yeah,
then with the remaining Congress people on the Democratic side, which would have actually been most of the caucus because Nancy Pelosi in the end was so conservative, uh, they could then wait for the Congress people to come to them to ask for their votes. Because without their support, none of the other candidates could have become a speaker. They were in the catbird seat. All they had to do was wait for people to come to them, and then they would have been in a position to negotiate committee assignments and rules changes and floor votes. They could have had as many floor votes as they wanted to have. They could have gotten rid of the pay-go rules. They could have passed rules such as if you put together a bill that gets 20 co-sponsors, you automatically get a floor vote in the House.
and that's essentially what the Freedom Caucus did with the GOP-led House now.
Yeah, that's essentially what they did. But of course, I would have put in a rule, or the progressives should have put in a rule to just make that automatic. You get your 20 co-sponsors. We have to schedule a floor vote for your bill in, let's say, 10 business days.
And if they would have succeeded, then those who voted against Medicare for all would be the ones that we would kick out of office. And that would have been the incumbents phase of dumping the corruption.
Yes.
See, I've been paying attention to your shows for a very long time.
Yeah, you've been paying attention. I mean, you're good.
Like, I knew that was the plan for force the vote all along, was to force the vote, then see who to dump out, get them out, elect progressives, and even get rid of a lot of the so-called progressives, those fake ones that are in the CPC.
There are a lot of fake ones. There are a lot of fake ones in the CPC. I think 50% of the CPC is probably totally fake. I mean, certainly I go over these names here. I've got, okay, this is last year's names. But you just start naming people. Well, Jayapal, okay, is she a real progressive? I don't know. She might be able to make a case. Katie Porter, is she a real lefty? Well, I don't know. She's about as lefty as Elizabeth Warren.
Or Ayanna Presley.
Right. Okay. And then there's Ilhan Omar. Yeah, I think she's a progressive. I guess I'd say Barbara Lee's a real progressive and Raul Grijalva. But when I get to Mark Pocan, I start wondering about it. Okay, when I get to Marie Newman, who was one of the vice chairs, I start wondering about it. Sheila Jackson Lee, I start wondering about it. I think Donald Norcross was probably one of the progressives, and Rashida Tlaib and David Cicilline from the first district of Rhode Island, Chuy Garcia, Bonnie Watson Coleman. But among the deputy whips, well, there was Cori Bush and Debbie Dingell and Veronica Escobar from Texas, Mondaire Jones, Ro Khanna, Lloyd Doggett, Andy Levin, Mark Takano, yeah, probably all of them. And you come to Adriano Espaillat in New York, no, not a real progressive. Jamal Bowman, I suppose. Teresa Leger Fernandez. I'm going down the list here for the 117th Congress. Jan Schakowsky is probably a real one. Bernie Sanders probably is correctly classified that way. Then you start getting to some problematic people. Alma Adams, 12th District of North Carolina. I wonder about that. And maybe Eddie Bernice Johnson from the 30th District of Texas. I'm not sure about her. I don't know whether she retired or not. I forget. I think Don Beyer is not that much of a progressive. He's from the 8th District of Virginia. He was my former congressman. Okay. Lisa Rochester, Blunt Rochester. I wouldn't say she's a real progressive. And, Suzanne Bonamici, 1st District of Oregon. No, I don't really think so. Then Brendan Boyle, 2nd District of Pennsylvania. I wouldn't say so. Then there's Chantel Brown.
She's far from a progressive. She's a milquetoast neo-lib.
Yeah.
Centrist.
Right, but really neo-lib. Then Andre Carson, 7th District of Indiana. I don't know about him. Nor Troy Carter, the 2nd District of Louisiana. Catherine Clark. I doubt Catherine Clark is, a real progressive.
She's not.
I don't think Judy Chu is a real progressive.
Catherine, anybody who is in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries.
Yep.
Anybody who is in lockstep with them is not considered to be a progressive in my book.
In my book, too. And Catherine Clark is now going to be the right hand of Hakeem Jeffries. And there is Sheila Phyllis McCormick. She may be one. And Matt Cartwright, he might be one also. But for God's sakes, there is, Madeline Dean of the 4th District of Pennsylvania. No way. Is she a progressive? She's a clear centrist. Same for Yvette Clarke of New York. Steve Cohen of Tennessee. And then, Danny Davis of Illinois. I don't know. I have questions about that. Also, Diana DeGette, Mark DeSaulnier. When you get into the foot soldiers of the CPC, the percentage of real progressives there gets low.
I'll tell you one who sure as hell ain't a progressive, and that's Nikema Williams and Lucy McBath. Those two, they're typical Atlanta Democrats.
Yeah, now you know them well. Okay, I didn't. I probably would have said until you told me different
Oh, hell no.
that they were progressive.
Far from it.
So it's good to know.
Let's go ahead and be mentally prepared. They do not pass the litmus test at all.
Oh yeah, well I don't think anybody's going to
Trust my judgment on this.
I trust your judgment, but I also think from what we've done so far that we're not going to find one congressman in the CPC that passes the litmus test.
I could probably count on one hand at how many could possibly do it, but that's just speaking a little too highly.
Well, we've already found out that AOC doesn't pass the litmus test, and Rashida doesn't pass the litmus test, and Ilhan Omar doesn't pass the litmus test. We've covered all of those already.
Neither does Jamal Bowman. Neither does who else? Ayanna Presley. None of the squad that I've seen in my analysis on the funding of their elections, neither of them will pass the litmus test at all.
No, I don't think so either.
And
I don't think they pass it.
They will definitely not pass it at all. Oh, look, the CPC has just put something out that their website is under maintenance right now.
Oh, yeah. You know what they have to do?
Update it.
They have to update it. They have to put in the members of the caucus who have still survived, and also the new people who have joined the CPC. People like Maxwell Frost. Also Delia Ramirez from Illinois, and Becca Bayland from Vermont.
But yeah, look, we don't need. I don't think we need to cover Lucy McBath or Nikema Williams, because I can go ahead and tell you, trust me, being that they're from the same state as I am, they sure will not pass the litmus test. So,
I'm sure she's not going to pass the litmus test, but we still have to show that based on the data.
Yeah. And I can probably do that Friday evening on my show. Like, I can help. Like, we can split this up and
that would help.
Yeah, I'll cover that Friday evening on my show, which this is something that is close to home for me.
How many will you cover on that show?
Friday evening, I'll do those two, and then I'll jump in there Tuesday and Wednesday evening at 10 p.m. I mean, Tuesday and Thursday next week, and cover the same basis.
Okay, I'm doing things on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah, we could split this up
for that group. Yeah, we can split it up, but we have to keep track. Okay,
funny you mentioned that, Steve, because Ron Placone just happened to accept my friend request on Facebook.
Oh, good.
So I am going to be approaching him and get him in on a Zoom call probably within the next week or so. And with, of course, Joe Firestone here, he's going to be in on it as well. So that way there's two people with Dump the Corruption movement in the Zoom call with him, so that way we can get him to, we can start catching some fish here.
Yeah, we can just talk to him about it
Yeah.
conversationally. And it would be a big thing if we could get him on our side.
And it would be amazing to have him be part of a panel discussion. And I also would like to get, like what we've been discussing on who to get on our shows, I'd like to also talk with Graham Elwood and
Yeah, I think that Graham Elwood. Okay,
And-
if we could be successful with Ron Placone first,
that would be a big fish that we can say we caught.
it would be easy to get to Graham Elwood at that point because they're good friends.
Yeah, and I like Ron Placone. He's a really great guy, really down to earth.
Yeah, I like them both, by the way.
Yeah, I had Ron Placone on my old Facebook account before it got perma banned by Zuck. You've known me to have like what, 3 or 4 different Facebook accounts in the time you've known me? Maybe 2 or 3.
I guess so. I really haven't been tracking that.
I'm a troublemaker.
Well, I know that. Of course, we troublemakers know each other.
And we keep the good trouble going.
That's right. The good trouble. I like that.
That's what John Lewis always said.
I know that.
And they
But
wouldn't even pass. And they wouldn't even pass
his
the
career. At the end of his career, though, he was all Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, but the thing is that irks my nerves as a Georgia resident. They wouldn't even pass the John Lewis voting rights law into the act into law.
I know.
And that just irks my nerves.
Yeah, that hurt me too. I thought that was awful. That's another, when you see that, the immediate first thing you think of is there's another reason why we have to dump the corruption.
That's right. That's why I was quick. You knew that I would jump on board like that.
I certainly suspected that you would. That you would see it.
And I'm willing to pass the dump the corruption down to Gen Z after we're done with it and keep it going. We have to.
Who?
And I think in each and every election cycle, whether it's local, whether it's state, whether it's federal, every election, we need to dump the corruption.
Oh, I agree. We have to keep on evaluating and make sure that people don't take any of the big money.
That's why I'm going to start working with some of the progressive diehards here in Georgia on starting doing the dump the corruption here on my state level. Even if I have to work with working with the Green Party in the 4 DSA chapters out of Atlanta, Athens, Savannah, Macon, like all over the whole state of Georgia, I'm going to work with the DSA chapters on getting socialists elected into power, and also talking with Kshama Sawant about the formation of a socialist alternative chapter for Georgia. That's how serious I am. I'm not willing to work with the 2-party system because they have failed us. They have totally failed us. We've got to start electing Greens to the local level, state level, national level. And I've looked at all the amounts of eligible voters that the Green Party should be reaching out to. They should seriously reach out to the eligible voters who do not vote at all and ask them, why do you, well, we already know the answer to that. The two-party system is a failure. They don't offer anything to the people. That's why the Green Party needs to get out there and talk with those potential voters, and keep their promises.
So I notice here that Steve says that he knows the Convo Couch people,
Mm-hmm.
and Jimmy and Steph, okay, and Ron Placode. Steve, if you can get Jimmy interested,
Please do.
In Dump the Corruption,
And I'm also
that would
planning
be great.
somebody I would like to really have on with a discussion in the realm of environmentalism would be Sandy Shullis with Environmental Coffee House to discuss dumping the corruption from an environmental standpoint.
I'd love that, actually. Sandy,
There's a lot of areas.
okay, I think Sandy is very good. Okay, I've met her in person some time ago. Must have been 2017. She was at an event where Steve Grumbine was giving a speech.
Was that up there at the Capitol?
No, it was at Lafayette Square. Okay, we had the event in Lafayette Square. It was in the summertime. Okay, it was hard for Barney because she just was getting. Okay, she recently, just before that, had started to have a problem with her hip, which has existed since that time now. But we parked about a block and a half away, in one of the garages in downtown DC. And it was hard for her to walk to Lafayette Square from there. It was really hard. We didn't think it would be that hard, but it was really hard on that day. Okay, but anyway, Barney and I both met Sandy there.
Had I lived closer and had a golf cart, I would have rode y'all around on it.
Oh, thanks. Okay, but anyway, yeah, Sandy is very, very nice. I've seen quite a number of her shows also.
I try to jump in her show when possible, when I can. But there's also that environmental aspect that I would like to also bring climate activists on board with as well, because because climate change it's running rampant, and we need constant support from climate change warriors on this matter. Like, we're going to have LGBTQ rights activists. We're going to have environmental activists, civil rights activists, and all that to discuss this and what we need to do to remove the money in politics and all that. And there's like all sorts of ideas popping around in my head of what I'd like to do with panels. Like, it's an endless possibility.
Yes, I know. There are all kinds of ideas, and I think they're all going to be great.
Like, I would like to bring as many people on board as I possibly can.
And that's what I want to do too. I think that's the key to success. Spread this around as much as we can. Get as many people as we can actually doing Dump the Corruption shows. If we can do that, then eventually we will win.
And don't forget Friday evening, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard, 7 Pacific. I will be having my show over on the Revolution Evolution channel. I will be getting the show link out to everybody I possibly can. I'll be doing a scheduled show so that way everybody can jump in and share it like wildfire, like we've been doing with this show as well.
Right, and you'll be sending me the stream link also, so I can join.
Yeah, it'll be in the chat, like in our main chat that we're in on Facebook. And I'd like to take as well in the near future and create like a Slack group or something like that. We can work together with Matt Waldy, so that way we can have like a centralized location where we're all together and working in all this.
Okay, well, I will see whether Matt, is ready to start to contribute again.
And I could probably watch some videos on YouTube on how to build a Slack workspace. That way I could figure that out on my own.
Yeah, I have no doubt that you can. There was a comment made by Steve Wolfbrand here. He said that pasta makes a fantastic vegan bury, B-U-R-Y. I understood that sentence up to the point, of bury. What is a bury?
Do you mean burger? Because the other night I made a vegan Mexican bowl that had lentils, beans, 2 types of beans, like refried beans, black beans, corn, all that good stuff. Even some rice.
Oh, you did it with rice?
Mm-hmm. Spanish rice.
Yeah. When you do Spanish rice, do you use saffron in it?
No, I use the Knorr's Spanish rice that's already pre-made.
Okay, Ryan says, well, I'm out of here for tonight. Love you all. Thank you, Kay. We love you too. Laura says, you're brilliant, Greg. I know you can figure it out. Steve says, I can recommend you to Convo Couch. Thank you, Steve.
Well, Cora, looks like we're going to recruit you to help us. Because we're going to need your help on creating the memes and graphics and such. So you can jump on board with us, and we would love to have you be part of the team, the movement with us, along with Amber Grigio. We're going to need a whole host of graphic artists who can jump on board and all this.
Yeah, and the way I'd like to set it up is that the streamers can feed them the material to keep them going. In other words, can feed them stuff that they can make a meme out of.
Mm-hmm.
That way they'll have a lot of material to work with, and hopefully would be able to produce a meme a day for the movement based on contributions from the streamers. Okay, but I think the meme team, though, should be governing itself. It should be self-organizing, and governing itself. And we streamers, should be feeding material to them. Of course, if they can find other material that works as well, that's fine.
I'm sure I could go into some commie groups and find some good stuff there.
From where?
commie groups on Facebook, like communist groups.
Oh, yeah, but are the commie groups in favor of dump the corruption?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well then
Oh
fine.
yeah. Ask ask Cora about the memes I send him that I get from communism groups.
Of course, it sounds good. I can help in my free time. Laugh out loud. Does it
Yeah,
laugh out
Cora and I
loud
are
mean that
always
you
sending
have
back.
free time, Cora, or does it mean you don't have free time?
Yeah, Cora used to make a lot of good stuff back when he was with RP, and that's how he and I, just like you and I, become friends as well.
So
You
you
know,
became friends with him at RP.
yeah,
I remember Cora came to a good many of my shows when I was with RP. And Brandy says, I love the commie groups on Twitter.
well, get me in some of them. I love commie
Robert
groups.
says, somebody should start doing videos on TikTok.
We have already discussed that, Robert, and that's one of our goals that we're going to work toward. I'm going to be creating a TikTok account here soon, but in order to go and do a live stream via TikTok, you will need more than 1,000 followers. And that's their requirement to go live on TikTok. You need a certain amount of videos and more than 1,000. I know the definite more than 1,000 followers though. Which I'm sure once this movement starts kicking off and everything goes viral over on TikTok.
Well, then if we can go viral on TikTok, it'll be great. Cora says he has some free time when I'm not working. And Steve says Jeffrey will need to appear on much larger channels to grow his show. Jimmy would be best, 1.2 million. Well, of course, I know Jimmy is best.
Yeah, Brandy's been begging me to get back on Twitter for a while now.
Brandy says, I'll start tagging you more now that you are back on Twitter.
Yeah, I like Twitter, especially.
Think of it, I've got to follow you on Twitter.
You do follow me back on Twitter at Rev Evolution 24.
Oh, I've already done that then.
Yeah, you've also tagged. I think somebody tagged me in a post on there. I think it was you the other day.
Yeah, I probably did.
Yeah, I'm going through my
your Twitter DMs.
Nah, yeah, you my Twitter notifications. Yeah, you did tag me in a post, and it was something from Stephanie Kelton.
Yeah, I probably tagged you today on.
And it was talking in regards to John Yarmouth. And that is what Bernie Sanders should have been doing.
I know.
Prior to when he was running in 2016. That's what he should have been doing, is what John Yarmouth did.
I know. And John Yarmouth was really good at it.
He was an MMT warrior.
Yes. Unfortunately, a little bit late, but maybe he can be an MMT warrior now in retirement.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't know why he retired. Okay, exactly. Okay, I'm hoping that he wasn't getting sick with something, and that's not the reason why he retired.
Yeah, I just dropped my Twitter handle in the live chat. I went over into the YouTube and did that.
Okay, I got to get the YouTube up.
Yeah, I'm using my official Twitter, Revolution Evolution YouTube channel. It's at Rev Evolution 24. For anybody who wishes to follow me.
Oh, I think I got it up because I'm getting an echo.
You're hearing yourself talk. That's what it is.
Yeah, I know.
That's why whenever I pop over to YouTube from the show, I automatically mute it. That way I don't have any playback. But I'm going to be taking later on this week and setting up my stream setup right over here in the corner of my bedroom. And putting up my Union Jack flag.
Your Union Jack flag.
Mm-hmm. Because of my British ancestry.
I see.
And I've actually been considering planning a trip over to where my ancestor graduated from. That would be a fun 2-month trip. County Derbyshire.
Where is County Derbyshire?
It's in the UK.
Well, I know that, but where in the UK is it?
I think it's in the East Midlands, up near. It's like, you know where Nottingham, Leicester. It's between Leicester, Nottingham, and Manchester, and Sheffield. And Wolverhampton. It's actually between Birmingham and Sheffield.
I see.
Oh yeah, you'll be watching me Friday night.
Yeah, I'll be watching you Friday night.
And of course, everybody is welcome to join and enjoy the camaraderie, because I'm going to have the two members of the CPC that are from Georgia that I know of are Nakima Williams and Lucy McBath will be the two that I will cover. Being as they're from the same state as I am, I felt that it would be appropriate for my first Dump the Corruption show to cover the two representatives from here in the state of Georgia. And since this is a topic that, and I'm also going to do another show on Dump the Corruption on the other Democrat Congress critters from here in Georgia as well. So my first episode will be on, my first few episodes on Dump the Corruption will be the Georgia Democrats.
Yeah.
And boy, I might piss some people off. I don't care. They need to be dumped.
Okay, Greg. That sounds great. Okay, I think I'm going to end this now because I've been going
over 2 hours.
And I've been going from 7 o'clock on.
Yeah, you go get you some rest.
Yeah, I started with KRTD special tonight.
But I'll see y'all again tomorrow night.
That's great, because I'll be here tomorrow night and picking up on doing whether CPC members are passing the litmus test.
And I will be live again tomorrow evening with Brand on Around the World with Brandy and Dee.
Yeah, and I might well be on with them tomorrow evening also.
Yeah.
at the same time. It's going to be
And
8 p.m. tomorrow, right?
yeah, it's going to be 8 till it's time for us to pop back over here.
Yeah. So that'll be fine. So we'll see you guys tomorrow night. And we're going to keep it going.
Till next time, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share, and follow.
Right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Where am I over here? I am here. I am gone.